We call the committee of the whole meeting for Tuesday, May 13th to order. Please call the roll.
Here.
Alderman Flacco. Here. Alderman Meyer.
Here.
Alderman Cantor.
Here.
Alderman Mark.
Here.
Alderman Parrish.
Here.
Alderman Brett.
Here.
Alderman Gephardt.
Here.
Mander.
Here. First up, we have approval of the meeting minutes from March 11th.
Approval. Second.
Motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions on the minutes as written? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. On to ordinances. Ordinance 2025-1681, an ordinance amending chapter 58 of the Mequon Municipal Code related to structures on Lake Michigan Bluff. I'm gonna reintroduce this one. It's been a while since we talked about it.
Yeah, thank you. So we introduced this, topic. Thank you. How is the sound projected? Like one this? Okay. So we introduced this in August of last year. We would say over, the 20 years that we've been here, there have been a handful of these types of requests. So it's definitely, has been a public interest. So we introduced this topic to the committee of the whole back in August of last year and indicated that we would work on it the early part of 2025. So we drafted some language. The direction of the committee of the whole at this time was to look for ways that we can provide property owners with access to the shoreline, but also limit the liability that the city would have, because we all recognized at the time that the studies of the bluff in the city of Mequon are mostly unstable, where in our neighboring communities where they do allow structures, they have much more stable bluffs and less significant slopes. So we worked on that language. We did present it to the planning commission, and they actually took 2 meetings to kind of vet through it. And I think those conversations were healthy because it did cause staff to think about a few things a little differently. And planning commission also had some recommendations. So at the closure of that action, the planning commission did recommend approval of the language that's in front of you tonight by a vote of 8-0. A couple of their recommendations or changes that were made were to add a requirement about repair or replacement if the structure starts to be dilapidated or no longer functional. So at the very end of the text amendment, you'll see that we bolstered some language to our typical enforcement process. And if the city notifies the property owner that there's concerns with the stability or the structure itself, that they're required to provide the city an action plan within 60 days of notice. Tonight at Public Welfare, the recommendation was to approve it 3-0. They added some language to that section of the text, which addresses not only if it needs to be repaired or replaced, but if it actually has to be removed as well. So the term removed was missing from the draft language. The other changes since August that staff made is addressing the technical standards of the structure. So we added language that's similar to all of our other accessory structures on properties. So this type of structure cannot be in any of the offsets. So it has to meet the same offsets that any other structure in that zoning district has to meet. That includes any cabling, any anchor system for the structure. Those have to remain outside of those offsets. It does limit the height of the structure itself, though if there's a railing system, it limits it to 4.5 feet in height. And then it ultimately limits the overall vertical height of the structure to no greater than 15 feet. Because as the slope changes, you might have sections of the structure that the support systems end up, in order to match the section before it, those support systems might be taller and cause the overall structure from grade to top of structure to be greater than the 4.5 feet. And then we also established a limitation on the actual walking surface and the platforms of these structures to 5 feet in width. one of the considerations that staff had is that we didn't want circumstances where an entire bluff was used for the switch backing of the structure and end up having multiple sort of platforms or decks or overlooks and consume the entire bluff. So in the draft language, it refers to it as 5 feet in width. At the Public Welfare Committee meeting tonight, we talked about the need for some flexibility for the length of those platforms in order to accomplish the switchback. So the recommendation out of Public Welfare tonight is that those platforms be limited to 5 feet in width, no greater than 7 feet in length, and in no case the platform can be greater than 35 square feet. So that provides a little flexibility to the actual construction to connect different sections of the structure. And midweek tonight at Public Welfare, being that this is the first reading tonight, we will kind of further vet the 5x7 and the 35 square feet, and we'll make sure we're confident with those numbers in time for the next meeting. You do vote and take action. But we'll follow up on that number, but right now we're kind of thinking the 5x7 is a good dimension. So the other update that we had from the original language, and it was discussed a little bit more at Planning Commission, is originally the language talked about requiring a professional engineer that had 10 years license and 10 years of similar experience. When we kept in the back of our mind reducing any liability for the city, we recognized that our staff would have to be vetting this professional engineer's resume and work and trying to make a determination as to whether it was similar or not. Probably having to follow up on the success of those projects and whether they failed. And we just felt that that was not a place where the city staff should be. And it didn't really meet the committee of the whole's objective about keeping this risk adverse for the city. So we did a little bit more due diligence on that. The text amendment cites that it would be a licensed professional engineer in the field, certified in geotechnical engineering, and is affiliated with the Professional Engineering Association. So, and then we further vetted that to make sure there were actual engineers in the state of Wisconsin that met those qualifications, and there are. So if the council would feel as though that's too restrictive in terms of the type of individuals that could do that, that would be a particular section of the code, of the text amendment you want to pay attention to. But Planning Commission was supportive of that provision as well. So that's kind of an overview of the changes that we made. And, there is the requirement that the property owner must certify and record at Ozaukee County Register of Deeds. They're aware of the inherent risk and the nature of the bluff. The reason for that reporting is that it will run with the land, and any future owners would also be aware of that responsibility associated with that structure.
All right, thank you, Kim. This is on as a first reading tonight, so we won't take action likely till next month, but this is a great time to give staff any final feedback going into that. So along those lines, open it up. Alderman Gephardt.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I had the opportunity of sitting through the Planning Commission tonight, and there were great discussions that took place at that meeting. I think staff did a very good job of following through on what we as a collective group had asked for in terms of this topic. I really particularly appreciate all the stakeholder input that you included in the packet, looking at it from all the different angles, from a safety perspective to code compliance to legal ramifications and all of that. That was really helpful. But at the end of the day, I was neutral on this when this topic first came up, and where I sit today is I'm going to have a tough time going ahead and supporting this. And I think the key factors in my mind that I just want to share with the group, and I may be in the minority on this given the fact of how it's already progressed to where it is from a unanimous perspective. But the factors that really concern me are, again, the condition of the bluff. There's no neighbor north or south that has the same rated condition of the bluff that we do. That is a big factor for me. I think the impact that that could create when we think of allowing structures, even though there's professional engineers, impact the neighbors is another one for me. This is also a life safety issue. This isn't like, somebody being out of compliance on keeping their home in good condition and has some peeling paint. If they don't address issues with something on the block, this is a life safety issue. And so when I think of it in terms of compliance and trying to enforce that, if we get to that point, and at some point we will, I think that puts some inherent risk on the city on how we're going to handle that and where we might ultimately be brought into some sort of action down the road if something were to happen that was unfortunate. Okay, and so I just have a really tough time wrapping my head around this and thinking that this isn't going to open up a can of worms. I would love for the residents to have the opportunity to have access down to the bluff. The other piece in my mind is that there's 3 public access points in the city of Mequon, Concordia, Vermont Park, and just south of Vermont Park, and I'm not including Ferry Chasm. That goes ahead and has an access point for that neighborhood as well. There's multiple ways to be able to get down there and enjoy the shore without having to go ahead and add a bunch of additional risk to the city and or permanent structures that might be built, even if it's done the right way. So where I stand is that I'm going to have a tough time wrapping my head around this to support it.
Thank you. Alderman Bach.
I respect Alderman Gebhardt's opinions, but what I am comfortable is that the city has done a tremendous job of checking all those boxes. And, we're talking about floating staircases primarily for residents who want to access their own property. And you have a newer technology that's proven in multiple jurisdictions and municipalities over the years that works and addresses all of the issues that Alderman Gebhardt raised. I think, and I commend, I know the city staff, this was not something that they wanted to put on their plate, but they did a absolutely fantastic job of looking at every possible issue and checking all of those boxes so that we would prevent what many of the things that you just mentioned. So if this was a quick decision, I would agree with you. But they have looked at it. They've gotten input from public safety, from the fire department, from the police department. They've checked with other municipalities who have allowed these kind of structures for years. And, if Vermont Park has a structure and that was allowed, I'm on the side of the residents who are interested in doing this. I'm not sure there's going to be a lot, but I think that I am completely comfortable with all the good work the planning staff has put in. And so this has been a year process, and I'm still highly supportive. And I think our main job as a council is to kind of listen, create good policy for the city. And I think this is an example of a good policy for residents who are interested in this. And so I support it 100%.
I would like to clarify, the city did not allow the structure at Vermont Park. They built that without our permission. And that's still a sticking point for the city and the county that may never get resolved. But it certainly has prompted interest from others by them going around us and putting it in anyway. Alderman Hanchard.
I have one question about the projects. When you talk about shall maintain the structure to avoid such becoming dilapidated or disrepair. How are you going to know that? Are you going to have regular checks? How are you going to know that if they build a staircase? How are you going to know if it's becoming disrepair?
That'll probably be complaint driven.
Okay, so it's not the city checking every year, making sure that it's still okay. It's just,
Yeah.
so it's just a neighbor say, hey, that doesn't look safe.
Yeah, we don't have the expertise to inspect such structures. And we don't, like all of our other code violation issues. We don't have, contrary to popular belief, we don't have someone driving around looking for things. It's often always complaint driven. Sometimes something's noticed while they're responding to another complaint, but we don't have a guy just driving. Alderman Strelchak.
So I sat on planning commission when this came up, and I'm gonna hear some of the other aldermen's comments here. You know, feel that residents to own property on the lake should have the ability to have access to the lake on their own property, want to fund it in a way that it's safe, right? As an alderman, I look at it with different times, right? It has to have safety, has to be compliant, has to be sustainable, and there has to be quick and fair recourse to fair placement or removal if something fails. As we know, anything to build today, probably 100 years from now, will probably be some level of maintenance, fair upkeep that's needed. When I sat on planning commission, I had these concerns in mind, and I brought forward the plan within 60 days of being notified. If you choose to support it or hesitantly support it, my agreement on planning commission was not everyone seemed really on board to add that in. So we got it added in knowing I'd have another opportunity for discussion here. There just doesn't seem like there's enough to that statement. So I can have a plan to replace it within a year. Doesn't say it must be accepted by the city, doesn't say it has to be repaired within a certain time period. And, you know, being a lake person in winter and things like that, a fisherman and everything else, and a winter surfer, right? I know you simply can't access the bluff in times of year, just the safety of the work. So even if you notice in like October with the winds, when the surf's up, bluff has failed, and that's a high probability time that it would, or winter when those waves come west. How quick do you need to prepare it? So plan within 60 days was good.
Well,
This meeting, I'd make a recommendation to reduce it to 30.
if you'd like to change the wording to accepted, that'd be fine, but that's the common practice staff uses all the time when there's a violation, we cite someone in the winter for lack of paint on a house, peeling paint, obviously if they can't paint it in the winter time. Staff gives them a reasonable date in the spring when the weather's better, and then the two work with it, they have to get it approved by staff though. That's functionally how the process works, so I don't think you have to worry about that.
I also have an attorney here sitting here to know if there's points that's argue.
Well, attorneys love to argue.
So, giving them less
Okay.
ability to, well, they're within compliance, they're gonna wait till the fall to do it because that's cheapest. May or may not be accepted, so maybe a clause in there. I would recommend that they have an action plan within 30 days, even if they show strong proof of making an action plan. Hey, we've been made aware of this. We've reached out to air companies. Here's what we're doing. At least that action plan is noted with the city immediately from a safety concern standpoint. It's on their private property, and the argument that came up is, well, they're really only at danger of themselves, but if it goes all the way down to the lake, somebody down there, up there, as soon as you have access to a public space, there's risks. So that would be the one thing that I think you consider.
Hey, Rob,
Yeah.
or indeed, sorry to interrupt. I was at that planning commission meeting you weren't
Yeah, of
at.
course you were.
We specifically discussed the 30 days versus something, the 60 that it ended up being. And if you go through the course of how this will go down, is to get an engineer out with a plan and a proposal in writing and submit it all within 30 days wasn't very practical, especially if it was, inclement weather off season, for example. So I'm just explaining why we ended up at the 60 days.
Yeah.
And then we also specifically talked about what happens after that 60 days and not wanting to create a new process that's different from how we enforce everything else, because that works. And Director Tolleson explained that process again to public welfare this evening. And it works. You get a complaint. Or do you want to explain it, Director Tolleson? So I don't miss what happens. The neighbor complains, then what happens?
Yeah, and we go out and we verify whether there's violations or not, and then we issue an order to correct with a deadline with specific actions that have to be taken. So that's what this step would be. And then, you know, we wait for them to comply and as long as we're having ongoing reasonable discussions, engaged reactions with them, if there's a little bit of additional time that they need, we're gonna grant that. You know, ultimately, at the end of the day, we want compliance. It's not meant to be so rigid that we're finding people on, you know, the very next day. Yeah, so, and then if they don't comply with our order to correct, then we would be issuing a citation, or we would be filing a complaint in court, which allows us then to, in either scenario, we can fine them daily. But the complaint in court allows us to just have an automated fine on a daily basis.
It's to my point, I guess what I was trying to kind of see, and I'm also trying to. This isn't, I don't know, like, it's near the lot line. And this item is not compliance, it's a safety issue. With ready access to somebody that's either down on the lake or. So, from a safety concern, my preference, that 30 days is some reasonable acceptance of. If we're making comments, we're talking about storm situations where they can't access it. It's in summer, or something happens. It's in the spring rains. They got to provide availability of people to come out. Still have 60 days. I'd like a little sense of urgency to where we free the staff up to be flexible as long as they see. Again, we want to be reasonable to people that want access to want something like this to property but then the lake. So it's right. Again, my concern is the safety situation.
Alderman Meyer.
Question to the city attorney and to Alderman Gephardt's point. Since these are all probably pretty unique type of situations and will be something that public will be doing a lot of property. Is there some way for us, or is it illegal for us to put inside of a home harmless version inside of the, and this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly for the immediate installer, that's something that's very possible. You do worry about enforceability in those type of provisions once you start moving multiple owners down the road. You run into every time the argument, I didn't know, it wasn't in my title report, whatever the case may be. And even just the mechanism of forcing somebody who applies, you have that face-to-face type of agreement that, I got the permit, so I'm willing to indemnify you because I got the permit. That relationship, that contractual relationship doesn't exist, that next property owner as directly. So it's hard to seek that type of protection as you move down the road. But, as I know it's the memo, realistically, the city's liability for things here is probably pretty low. Inspection issues tend to be things that there's a lot of discretion, as you've heard me say, when there's discretion in terms of how you're addressing issues. But that's where typically the sovereign immunity applies. So there's no liability that attaches to those actions. The liability would really only apply if they bring points to some mandatory step or mandatory action that you had to take that you failed to process. And so the arrangements within the host code as it is of just follow the enforcement path really isn't going to open us up to significant liability for some structure that collapses and then ends up injuring somebody. That's more of a homeowner's issue. Their homeowner's insurance, apply at that point, so.
So the answer is yes, we can do it, but it might be difficult down the road.
Well, I think the city attorney's point is you don't have that personal relationship and the same understanding, but that's exactly why staff has put provisions in where there's something recorded with the title up at Ozaki County. That person will get it when they transact the property. That's the hook to inform them that, hey, you have this unique circumstance on your property. That's why we built those things in over the past number of months, was specifically for concerns like this. So I think we've addressed that one as best we can. It's not, nothing is perfect. We are running quite long on this topic. So if there are things that are specifically surrounding actions staff should take before they present this back to us. We've had a lot of good general discussion. We've talked about this in a general nature 3 or 4 times already. And we'll get to talk about it again next month when we vote on it. In the interest of time, I would like to focus the conversation on changes to what's written so we can keep staff pointed in that direction. And we'll get to talk about this again next month. We're not even voting on it tonight. Alderman Parrish.
I'm okay with Alderman Strelchek's suggestion for 30 days, as long as we can give staff some discretion. The applicant's horrible weather and reasons that are satisfactory to staff were delayed beyond 30 days. But I agree, there could be major concerns. The summer could go by with it sitting in a dangerous state. So it's a good point.
Alderman Strelchek.
Jim reminded me, we don't have an inspection clause in this record.
We're specifically not inspecting them on a periodic basis because we have
Yeah, I understand.
no capability and we don't want to be responsible.
We want to report out every time. You can't build something, expect it to sit for. So long as it's.
Please have that, putting the burden on home.
That provide.
Say you want to provide inspection. Then that's the city every time.
HOAs have to inspect the ponds every time. Not much happen on it.
Right, normally those types of circumstances require certifications and escrow accounts. It's also still administratively something staff has to track, because if they don't request the inspection, then we're going after them for the inspection themselves. Our review of this will simply be to be sure that the structure was built outside of the offset through their zoning permit that they got. This is not being inspected from a building code standpoint. That is all, on the engineer to certify. So even if we did it in 5 years, or whenever we did it, we would just be verifying that, it has to be compatible.
I'm asking for language to be passed along. What's the burden? Inspection there. You got excellent. Or 10. Whatever that is. And, the city doesn't inspect the ponds. Independent engineering from qualified capabilities to inspect the ponds. For everybody's sake.
So we have similar language in the code for other things. We can mimic something like that and share it and stuff.
Yeah, see if we want to add it or not. If we don't, council. Thank you.
Any other feedback for staff?
Just one quick question. Kim, if somebody did choose to install one of these floating staircases, would the neighbors be notified? I mean, would that be a card that would be sent, to, like you send out at some point?
Would be a notification like that, because it's not going to any sort of board or people. Don't think we have regulation here. Normally those cards go out because you're attending like our core planning commission,
Yeah,
so there isn't a trigger right for that.
but
information.
like I'm putting on just a screen porch and my neighbor's got that card probably because that was, but this is different.
Yes, it's different, it's not going to be board for review.
Got it.
Alderman Brett.
So with the two existing structures that we have that provide public access, like when work gets done, like you think of floating irrigation especially, county obligated to follow. They're doing repairs, doing work to get a replacement, they're obligated to follow this process. Yeah, I don't think there's something on that.
That's me, I would say yes, but this be in terms.
The city would tell you yes, the county would tell you they don't need to follow any of our rules.
That is effectively the issue that we have with construction. It's an issue that probably likely will, I shouldn't say likely, but may end up in the courts at some point. And it's not a for certain. I think we have the ability to regulate it. They disagree.
Any other feedback for staff before this, comes back before us next month? There's no further feedback. I think we'll move on to the next item. Discussion item regarding a new hotel development feasibility analysis for the Port Washington Road corridor. The RFP for said feasibility analysis.
So we drafted a request for proposals for firms to determine the feasibility of the new hotel development in the Port Washington Road corridor from County Line to Glen Oaks. This was a direct recommendation of Port Washington Road market analysis that was completed in November 2024. The Economic Development Board did review the draft and have some modifications to it. They did recommend approval unanimously of the RFP. If you recall, the market analysis indicated that the market could support a hotel somewhere between 60 and 100 rooms and likely a 4-star hotel. It also identified 13 redevelopment sites and made some recommendations for all of those redevelopment sites. But the consultant indicated that they are not skilled in the hospitality entertainment industry, and the recommendation would be if the city was interested in this type of development in the corridor, that the RFP would be the right approach. The idea of the hotel, along with some entertainment that would come with it, was under the classification of a transformative kind of catalyst redevelopment project for that corridor, and that there are likely ancillary domino indirect economic benefits to this use as well. So the RFP does ask that any sites suitable for this would be identified, that they would identify the characteristics of the hotel in terms of rooms, entertainment space, conference, etc. And then also asks them to go through an economic performa so that we can be vetting the hopefully potential variety of sites. And the other recommendation from the market analysis really identified this as one of the focus type redevelopment projects should the city be interested in attracting redevelopment sooner. So we drafted that RFP. We did receive a laundry list of firms from the consultant that we should solicit the RFP to, and we would also solicit it to a number of different websites. And I put together proposed a timeline for the RFP. And if the council is supportive of issuing this and utilizing staff's resources this way, we would probably get this RFP out by the end of this week.
Alderman Bach.
I support the RFP. you know, I again want to proceed very carefully on this particular topic. We have the survey going out. I believe we have some questions from, you know, residents on this topic. So that'll be some good feedback as well. And I like the idea of identifying sites. I think we had some preliminary sites that were identified, but, you know, it has to be, you know, it has to be at a site with no kind of resident impact, you know, so we have to find the perfect site. It has to be kind of a nice boutique, expensive kind of hotel. We have lessons learned. I remember when I was on the planning commission and we had a very spicy meeting with a developer who wanted to put up a little box hotel right on the current Lumia property. And I remember there was a lot of resident, you know, issues and complaints, and that was too close to the residential development. So I like the process of listening to the residents in the survey and then identifying kind of a place that might work and then continuing the discussion. But, you know, my advice is to lesson to learn from that one meeting and proceed carefully. But I think it's a good process.
You make an excellent argument for the city leading this project so you can affect the outcome of where the sites are being considered. The private market will put anything anywhere it thinks it wants to and ask you to bend your rules to get it there. But this will be a better process for ensuring we get something we think we want where we want it with those considerations in mind. So thank you for those comments.
Data-driven decision making.
Exactly. Yeah. Not speculative, just data driven. Yeah. If it ends up not making financial sense, why would you go through the effort?
And I think we would have a pulse on the community sensitivities as we typically do with our land use decisions. This gives us the, you know, data from the market and the hotel users to see if these locations are good fits.
Alderman Strelchuk.
Hearing what both you and Alderman Bach have said, again, you know, in the packet it says 4+ star. As we know, the zoning, if you zone it hotel, the top will come in and everybody built with that certain zone design by site. And we've run into issues where not every applicant on planning fit what we're hoping to see on those locations based on this. So whatever we can do in this RFP to identify not only A, what does that boutique hotel look like, high-end 4-star plus look like, but how can we continue to ensure that that happens, whether city purchase property or get out, allow them to do it based on our parameters, the town center, community development, something else.
You can also address that by just changing the land use map, but not the zoning. And then you can control it through the zoning process. If you get applicants that don't meet your criteria, you don't have to rezone it. So there's a natural way to throttle the process to make sure you don't get something you don't want.
Agree, but in fairness to developers, we should have a standard as to looking for it, we're gonna have variance.
I think that's the purpose of the study.
We've been in the position as a city where we pick winners. There's a little bit too much in the past, and that's curve related with policy. Done a nice job of not doing that. So we just have to be cautious with.
That's exactly why we're doing this, proposing doing the study. So we're not the ones picking. Alderman Meyer.
Kind of lukewarm on this. We got a lot of information that have been done on it, and we can get over to recommendations back. But ultimately, it's going to be developer that comes in, the hotel comes in, and it's feasible for us to do, but not that. You said, let's say we want to do this, let me do this, limit down to what individuals or what development's going to come into that area. Give us a proposal of something. But I still think it's going to be fine. I'll probably go for a pretty small.
Alderman Gabhart.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to speak just on behalf of the Economic Development Board for a minute, which I sit on. And the importance of this for what they're trying to accomplish. And certainly one of the agenda items for the committee is TID 4 and 5 along this corridor and how we responsibly create some economic development that's thoughtful in this area that we're talking about, doing this feasibility report for the hotel. Alderman Meyer, when you talk about thinking of it in terms from the investor's perspective, interestingly enough, when we kicked the tires on this at the Economic Development Board before bringing it here to the committee as a whole, that was a topic that we discussed in terms of what we wanted out of the report is for it also to be thinking in terms of what the investor might want to be seeing out of the report so that it helps city staff go ahead and be able to promote this if it's the right project and be able to go ahead and drive that economic development that we're looking for and the reason that TID 4 and 5 were put in place to begin with. So, you know, there's been a lot of discussion around this and I'd ask the group really to consider again, you know, TID 4 and 5 and where we're at with that and having since we had a market analysis that says that a hotel would be a suitable use for this area or somewhere in this area, it would be nice for city staff to go ahead and be able to develop a criteria around that. And also through this report, be able to use that as a promotional tool with potential investors if we get to that point. So I'm thinking that it covers all the bases that or concerns that you had. And in any event, I wanted to put that on the table for consideration as well. Thank you.
Any other feedback on the potential RFP? I think we do need some sort of decision coming out of this body for you to move forward.
Well, assuming there's general consensus, we would issue the RFP. Obviously, the council would have the opportunity to say yes or no to the contract. Because we
Correct.
would be bringing back a contract work to actually select a consultant. I mean, you don't want to spend staff resources if this isn't something you want to spend time on. And we also don't want to signal to consultants that we want to go down this study, bring them here with a recommendation if there really isn't support to go forward. So we wanted to, you know, do a gut check with the council and make sure you're comfortable with us releasing this RFP.
That's an important point to make sure everyone understands is we're just letting the RFP move forward and depending on what we get back, if you were looking for, we can reject the bids at that time. So maybe just a straw poll, who's in favor of general agreement with sending the RFP out to see what we get back? Okay,
A couple of words.
so that's okay. Lukewarm is a perfectly fine position. That's all right.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
One
Go ahead,
more
yeah.
question on that. It seems like maybe it's a side here though. Back of that, maybe asking them how we go forward marketing that. To their response on how we go forward marketing.
That's a good question to answer. My hope is the consultant will also be the guy who's trying to sweet talk the investors at the same time. So would it be good to know?
But if not,
All right, moving on, we have the committee of the whole work calendar. Looking forward to June. I see the legal compliance update. 60 minutes of legal fun, maybe some training for us or some overview things. And then an update on TID 3, the public improvements, the budget, remaining budget, the banners, the signs, etc. Hopefully maybe an update on railroad crossing. Like a broken record. And then you can see what's coming forward in the months ahead. If there's any questions on that, bringing forward now. Otherwise, we'll talk more about it next month. Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned and we'll immediately reconvene as the common council.